Hello, hello. Welcome to Expansive Astrology with Melissa O'Malley. This is Libra season, week 4. We're already at the end of Libra season. Can't believe it. I'm always sad. I'm always sad at the end of a season, but then I'm always so excited for the beginning of the next season, so whatever. This week, we're talking all about balance. Creating balance, finding balance. A keyword for Libra season is balance. The phrase for Libra is I balance. So this week, we're going all the way in and examining many of the ways that balance exists in our lives. Today, I'm going to share a whole lot of ways we can embrace dichotomy in life, live in the grayness, find center when we are feeling totally uncentered, and embrace the dialectics of life. The opposite of balance is instability. The opposite of balance is extremes, right? So let's dive in there. Let's chat about spectrums and polarities, because that's where a lot of the work for this week exists. I love examining nearly anything and everything in terms of where it falls on a spectrum. I like kind of creating spectrums in my mind. Spectrums exist everywhere, and it's especially important to acknowledge and embrace the spectrum when you're feeling very all or nothing, when you're experiencing an extreme in some way or another, an extreme emotion, an extreme thought, an extreme any sort of extreme circumstances. It can really help to recenter us when we kind of picture this, picture a spectrum, embrace spectrums. Now, you can know that you're in an extreme when you catch your narratives being very all or nothing, right? So things like, it's always depressing in the winter. That's an extreme. That's all or nothing. Today totally sucks is an example of all or nothing thinking. I've been anxious for weeks on end. I hit every single red light on the way, everywhere I go, of course. Those are just some examples. We do this all the time. Start to catch your narratives, catch yourselves when you're using very all or nothing language. When words creep out like always or never, that can tell you that you're using very all-encompassing and all language. Now, our brain automatically likes to think in terms of black or white. So, and our brain kind of doesn't always question itself. Right? So when we say things like today totally completely sucked, that's very all or nothing. When we say things like I'm always depressed in the winter, those things might be true. And it's important to catch those narratives and see if there's any way that we can kind of open them up or shift them a little bit to include more grayness. So even in like really slight, tricky ways. So we can say things like, I feel like I'm always depressed in the winter. Kind of gives the brain this clue that this is a perception, this is a feeling, and it doesn't have to be this way. That if we say, I feel like today totally sucked, or I don't know, I feel like today totally sucked. It kind of allows the brain to loosen up on the all or nothing thinking. It kind of allows the brain to acknowledge like, okay, this is a feeling, and maybe a lot of the day did totally suck. This isn't about invalidating yourself. Some days you need to be a little dramatic. Some days we need to complain that everything totally sucks. Sometimes it, in a weird way, feels good to be in that place, right? Those feelings can be valid. And it's very important to recognize where that begins and ends. Find exceptions to these things. Find exceptions to the extremes. Even if they feel so totally true, Do the work of finding exceptions to these things. Don't be afraid to acknowledge where good exists. Don't be afraid to acknowledge the exceptions to these things. So another example might be, I'm trying to think of good examples. Instead of, I always hit every red light, even if that was true today, tacking on today at the end of that helps the brain acknowledge, like, this might not happen tomorrow. I think that's so important, and I've seen it work in my own life, checking my narratives, and I've seen it work for my clients. So, because here's the thing. Our brains are really comfortable existing in polarities and extremes because there's very little square footage at the end of the spectrums. There's very little square footage that our brains have to manage and navigate for us. The more black or the more white, the easier it is for our brains to quickly identify where we are and what we need to do and what's happening here. Right? But there's so much more to be experienced in the spaces in between the black and the white. There's so much more that exists within the spectrum than what happens on the polarities. I love this quote. The color of truth is gray. That comes from a person named Andre Gide. I'm guessing at the pronunciation. I hope I'm correct. Andre Gide said, the color of truth is gray. I love that. This is a strength of airy Libra. And to be able to see all perspectives and all sides of all kinds of potential, to make connections and initiate us into beautiful things. So let's embrace that gift that Libra brings, and let's practice. Let's practice pulling ourselves away from the polarities in life. Let's practice living and existing in more grayness, which can be really uncomfortable for our brains. So here's just a few spectrums that we can begin to practice noticing and embracing, like in our day-to-day lives, right? Spectrums of emotions, whether that's like placing yourself, identifying where you fall on a spectrum from angry to happy, or a little more specific, like where do I fall on the anger spectrum from mildly angry to infuriated. Spectrums of emotions can really help us. Where do I fall on the spectrum from hopeful to hopeless? Where do you fall on the spectrum from passive to aggressive, which we spoke a little bit about last week, where in the middle is assertiveness. And part of the work of this is identifying where that middle exists. At any given moment, you can place yourself on a spectrum from empowered to disempowered. What does that look like? Where do you fall? Are you feeling more empowered in this conflict, or am I feeling more disempowered? How can I scooch closer to the empowered side? There's a spectrum from being all the way to doing, and we can fall in the middle of that spectrum. This one's a little more abstract, right? Doing things and engaging in things and being productive and caught up in doing. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's just being, which is very like mindful, zen, just existing and being okay, just existing. Where do you fall on the spectrum? Where are you existing on the spectrum from logic to emotional? Now, this is very dialectical behavioral therapy. Spoiler alert, what a surprise. I'm using dialectical behavioral therapy. I love it. And that one in specific, the spectrum between being really logical and being emotional, they call the middle of that scale, of that spectrum, wise mind. They call it wise mind, to be existing in a place where you're centered and you're able to apply necessary logic, but you're also able to embrace whatever emotions are coming up. That's what they call wise mind. And DBT has a whole big section all about like finding wise mind and engaging with the world from a place of wise mind, balancing logic and emotion. Where you fall on the spectrum in relationships between here's your needs at one end and the other person's needs at the other end. Where are you hanging out on the spectrum in your relationships? Where are you hanging out on any given day? This can change day to day. Extroversion to introversion, or feeling a little shy to feeling outgoing, which are not synonymous. Being outgoing and being extroverted are not the same thing. But it can really help to kind of evaluate, like, where am I sitting today on a scale like that? Am I needing to honor some alone time? Am I able to find balance there? The spectrum from comfort to anxiety to anxious. Where do you fall on the spectrum from comfortable to totally anxious? And how can you tend to that? One key skill to achieving this is learning to hold this concept of both and. Maybe you've heard of this before. Rather than any time you find yourself in times of thinking like either this or this, see if you can apply rather than either this or this. Can it be both this and this? This can help us embrace some grayness. This will help you find center, find balance, find grayness. Remember, you can both have a really shitty day and enjoy yourself. That's crazy. That's wild to think of, right? You can both have a really difficult, challenging, frustrating day and enjoy it. What would that look like? Does that feel possible for you? Now, again, this doesn't include invalidating the fact that it is a difficult day, right? Or the fact that it has been super frustrating, or the fact that you have been wronged in some way, whatever is existing. This is not about invalidating that fact, but it's about holding that fact and still enjoying yourself anyway. Remember, you can both feel really angry at someone and love them very much. That doesn't have to be an either or. You can both crave intimacy and really want to be intimate and close and feel very protective of yourself and afraid of that. And you can both really want to help and want to be supportive and say no or set a boundary. There's so much power in this, in this alone. There's so much power to be held when you acknowledge these things, when you acknowledge, like, I am both very fucking pissed at you and I still love you, dumbass. Just kidding. There's a lot of power when you embrace something like, I'm really wanting to be intimate and close, and I'm really wanting to set my guard down, and I'm feeling very protective and afraid of I'm feeling very afraid and protective of myself. It's so powerful to hold both of those things as true at the same time, rather than existing in just one or the other, right? If we just exist in like, man, I'm feeling so afraid and protective of myself, we're at risk of denying that other side. We're at risk of totally closing ourselves off to the other side of that, which is, I want to be close and I want to experience intimacy. Whatever is existing for you. These are just a couple quick examples that I came up with. Whatever is existing for you, see if you can embrace the both and of what's happening. Both, I'm anxious and wanting to do this thing, whatever the thing is. Both. There's a million examples. There's a million examples. So where does your comfort zone exist? Like I said, our brain likes to be on one end of this spectrum or another. That's where most of our brains are most comfortable. And Libra is a master of comfort, of creating and bringing comfort. So where are you the most comfortable? Where do you hang out in polarities? Where do you resist the gray? Are there any areas where you're neglecting to pay attention to this? Just for comfort's sake, in order to maintain your comfort? Can you expand your comfort zone to include more and more and more grayness, which usually means expanding our comfort, expanding our tolerance for not knowing something or for being unsure? Practice placing yourself on spectrums as you move about your life, and see if you can just be with the potential at any given time that you could shift yourself a little bit more one way or another in order to find more grayness, more balance. Be open to the potential that you can move yourself from one end of the spectrum to another in order to find what you need. Observe with curiosity and choose empowering behaviors that keep you feeling balanced. When we're able to step out of our own perspective and observe what is focused or what is unfolding outside of us, and then place ourselves on the spectrum, kind of identifying where we are in relation to everything else, we're able to understand ourselves so much better. This relates back to last week. There's this balance of like holding and appreciating and seeing and observing without grasping too desperately or without being in an extreme frame of mind, an extreme emotion. Beauty is best appreciated when we're able to maintain a sense of detachment, when we're able to move beyond attachment. Roy Gillette says, accepting loss by welcoming change and still being loving, even in our darkest hours, is what truly endears us to others. So this is the reminder, I'm kind of reiterating here, that we can step back from a situation, observe what is unfolding, and then place ourselves on a spectrum, like get pretty logical with it, and place yourself back in the situation and see exactly where you're falling, see exactly where you're contributing, see exactly where you can adjust your own thought processes, your own behaviors in order to find more balance and find more centeredness on a spectrum. I especially like doing this in terms, like, I'm always evaluating, like, how activated am I right now? How angry am I right now? Where am I falling in terms of like just how I'm showing up right now? And can I adjust that to be a little bit more centered and a little more empowered and a little more balanced? The intention of this work is kind of to tie together everything that we've been working on in Libra season, from justice and coping with injustice and coping with those things in the world and in our lives that like we might not approve of, or that we might not be able to directly influence and affect change with. We're tying together how we engage in conflict and how we show up in our relationships, kind of looking at all of this stuff and maintaining an ability to adjust how you're showing up, adjust where you're at, so that even in times of great conflict, or even in times of like heart-wrenching, totally unfair injustices, you can, even if it's not directly center in the middle, you can kind of adjust and identify where you're falling in the situation and how you can where you kind of visualize where you would like to be instead. We often neglect our own power, or forget our own power, or give our power away to different situations. And it's almost like this is like my big shtick. This is what I find myself returning to again and again and again, is reminding clients and reminding in these videos how much power we have and how we can empower ourselves and show up for ourselves in ways that feel more aligned and more empowered. Geez, I need some synonyms for empowerment. But don't discount the level of power that you have. Don't discount how much power you can grasp and the ways that you can affect change in your life and in the lives around you, especially when you kind of move away from these extreme feelings or extreme ways of thinking and embrace more grayness. When you find yourself on any end of the spectrum, again, validate it. Validate yourself. You are valid. No matter where you're falling on the spectrum, no matter where you find yourself is valid. And maybe you would feel a little more empowered. Maybe you would feel a little more in control. Maybe you would be able to change what's going on if you bring yourself a little bit further into the grayness. So the affirmation for this week is, I find balance from within. This also ties back to last week's talk about feeling whole as an individual and not placing our responsibility for our sense of self-worth and self-esteem, not placing responsibility for that on anything outside of ourselves. I find balance from within. Helps you to acknowledge, a mantra like that can help you to acknowledge how much power you have over how you're showing up and over how you're interpreting situations. And you can always, maybe always is a little extreme, right? And I stand by that. You can always adjust how you're showing up. You can always take charge of how you are showing up in a situation. So that's what I have for you today. I really hope that this resonates. I hope that this inspires. I hope that you can practice with this and start to flex that muscle of empowering yourself to be more gray, empowering yourself away from the polarities and into more dichotomy, or into more comfort with dichotomy, into more comfort with not knowing all the details, or not holding on so tightly to what your perspective is. Knowing that everything is gray and that everything can shift at any given moment, and especially that you can shift things at any given moment in some way or another, whether that's shifting how you're behaving or how you're interpreting a situation. Remember, we obviously can't control what's happening outside of us, but we have so much power when we can embrace control inside of us. And I think that's something that Libra season calls us to look at and to explore. So yeah, that's what I have for you this week. Take really good care of yourself. Do some practice with this. Be gentle with yourself. And I'm going to say, maybe for the third or fourth time in this video, this doesn't include invalidating yourself. Validate yourself. What you feel and where you show up and where your brain goes automatically is valid. And can you adjust to be a little more empowered? Even just a little bit. All right. Take really, really good care of yourself. Leave a comment. Let me know what resonates for you. Let me know just how this lands for you, what comes up for you. Where is this hard for you? Feel free to let me know. I'd love to chat with you. If you're not subscribed, it helps so much for you to subscribe, like the video, leave any feedback. I'm open to hearing it. And thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you so much for doing this work. This is why I'm bringing this work to you, is because I know that when more people engage with this kind of work, and when more people empower themselves and are able to center themselves, the whole world benefits, right? Your ability to do this stuff is going to impact, it's going to have a ripple effect on your entire world. The more empowered you are, the more aligned you are, the better. It influences the rest of your world, and thus the rest of the world, right? So thank you for being here. Don't be afraid to really engage with this work and show up better and better and better. Not that there's anything wrong with you as you are right now, right? Both holding knowledge that you are valid and you are wonderful and miraculous and powerful and magical as you are, and all of us could stand to be a little bit better, a little bit more empowered, a little bit more aligned. So let's do the damn thing. I will see you next week. Take really good care of yourself. Bye.